one of the questions we're asking everybody that we meet with is, why do you want the job? And why are you the best candidate? We'll start with you, Mr. Talley.
Oh, thank you. I'm glad the way you phrased it, because it is a job. I think we all in this room have been in front of hiring authorities or managers or even panels trying to articulate our past experiences to get a job. And myself, I'm a 16-year veteran. Proudly wore the uniform, still wear the uniform in the reserves. Deployed for 7 years of my life, so I know how to work in a hostile work environment. I'm pretty certain that's probably not so hostile at the state capitol. My family's been here since 1820 on both sides of my family. Colonel James Neal was at the Battle of Gonzales, and Edward Burleson, who is actually one of the first legislators to found Hays County. So I got deep roots. I'm run 3 national nonprofits and 2 local nonprofits. So I know how to be a good steward of donor dollars and how to be very transparent. One of them that I'm really proud of is OSC. It's in Hays County in Dripping Springs. We're a national nonprofit, won our 4th Platinum Transparency Award. So I think government needs to be good stewards of your tax dollars and needs to be completely transparent. So we can reinstill the faith and confidence of the constituents. I also run a few for-profit businesses. Right now, the 2 of the ones that are taking off the most is in development. I got a $150 million project in North Texas, as well as in oil and gas. We're doing a lot of business between Texas as well as even in Oklahoma, where we'll be building storage tanks. So I think those relationships that are global in energy, Texas is number 1 right now in export and number 3 in energy in the world, will suit me well and my constituents at the state capitol, as well as my past experiences. Thank you.
Mr. Wymore?
Yes, sir. And Austin, thank you for your service to our country. To me, this comes down to the idea of what is representative government about. My family's lived in Hays County for the past 36 years. Moved to Hays County when I was a very young boy, and my dad was a custom home builder, and my mom was a stay-at-home mom, and she later went back to then Southwest Texas State, and she got her undergraduate degree and later her master's degree. She was an elementary school teacher and principal. This is the community that I grew up in. I remember it when it was a much different community, but it's a special place. Representative government at its best is about being from somewhere, loving somewhere, and wanting to serve that place. And that's what District 45 is to me. It's where I grew up. It's where I went to high school. I got my undergraduate degree. It's where I met my wife, and it's where I'm raising my kids. It's also where I built my business. I operate my own law firm. It's the Wymore Law Firm. We focus largely on business and real estate work, with focus on some litigation and some transactional work. And I've been able to build relationships, not only in that capacity, but also individual capacity. I have independently served the Republican Party in Hays County. From 2009 to 2012, I served as the chairman of the Republican Party during a period of great success. And I certainly don't take credit for that solely. It was a wonderful team effort. I'm proud of the work we did and the elections that we won. It set a great foundation, and I believe the party's continued to grow from that. But again, back to that initial point, why am I running? Representative government at its best is someone loving a place, caring about a place, and wanting to get back to their home. District 45 has given much to me. It's good to my family, it's good to my kids, and I want to give it a voice in the Capitol that meets with its expectations and wants to serve it, someone that is here now and will be here for years to come.
Thank you.
Yes,
By
sir.
the way, I forgot what we had just agreed to. I was going to say, for the viewers online, that
Yes, sir.
a 3rd candidate, Carrie Isaac, did not respond to our requests for an interview.
Well,
So she's not here.
Bud and I, we thank y'all for the opportunity and time and effort that it took to do this. We understand it's given us the advantage of being able to put our platform to your viewers and subscribers, and we also apologize that Mrs. Isaac didn't feel that was necessary to come.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
We'll start with you on this one, and we'll go the other way.
Yes, sir.
As you travel the district, what are the hot button issues that people are talking about in your district? What's important to them?
The biggest hot button issue that we see in the district time and again is property taxes. And there's other issues. National politics will always be very, very prevalent. People are going to focus on those national hot button issues and that narrative. When talking to people and knocking on doors, I always want to talk and bring them back to the local issues, because that's what we're going to deal with. By and large in the district, it's property taxes. And with the current system, Texas was once a much more rural state, much more agrarian. And the system that we had for property taxes worked when Texas wasn't so urban and suburban. But as we increasingly have these pockets around major metropolitan areas where people are living on smaller lots, those values are increasing, and it's making home ownership more difficult as time goes by. And so the question is, with a shift in what Texas looks like from decades ago, how do we address that problem? How do we provide relief to property owners? One, I think it starts with statutorily addressing the issue of property taxes increasing on an annual basis. I would be a proponent of a plan that would limit the annual dollar increase on property taxes so people could have certainty. They would receive their property tax bill and not have that sinking feeling in the pit of their stomach and know my property taxes aren't going to increase more than X number of dollars. What I think that would also do, serve as a very good way to keep there from being excessive challenges. And when people have their property taxes raised large amounts, that's going to incentivize challenge to what it is that they've been assessed. By giving that certainty, we de-incentivize protests, and we take a look at the system that we have in place, potentially eliminating what's a system that exists merely because of these protests. If we don't have them in abundant numbers, we have a bureaucracy that can potentially be extremely lessened, saving taxpayers money, or eliminating it. The other thing that I would like to see is a more aggressive cap on rates. But these are the ways that we deal with that. The other big issue that I see, especially in the I-35 corridor and in parts of the western parts of the district, Dripping Springs area, is infrastructure. Rapidly growing area. And the district has grown and infrastructure has not been able to keep up. I'm proud of the work that members of our Commissioners Court have done to try and provide those needs, but we need a strong voice at the Capitol that's going to work to bring that necessary funding and get the district the infrastructure it needs.
I think what happens a lot with legislators, they become a one topic, one initiative candidate, and that's obviously not the case. When our legislation is passing over 1,000 bills, I think you can take on multiple tasks. What I'm getting from the majority of the district in block walking is obviously they want to address property tax. They also want to address the home appraisal, the appraisal districts. Our appraisal districts are composed of people that have a vested interest in the increase of our property taxes, property appraisals. And it's difficult when most of our residents don't know that you can go and contest that appraisal and or understand the process of it, and the short window they have to contest it. And that's getting out of control. I think you need to make the chief appraisal an elected position. I think the appraisal districts need to be composed of the everyday, Jack and Jill, people that want to have reasonable appraising on their homes. The appraisal is proven at purchase, and it's proven at repurposing. Once it's paid off, why are we continuing basically to rent our property from the government? That's been a big issue. They want to end tax-paying lobbying, which I think they're finding that $41 million last legislation that was counterproductive to increasing transparency and in tax-paying lobbying. Why is the $41 million taxpayers' dollars going towards that in lobbying? If legislators, state reps actually are doing their job and communicating with the county commissioners and communicating with the municipal leaders in their district, it's 140 days of session. You should be working 16, 20-hour days. If you're not doing that, then you don't deserve it. And so if we're communicating with our districts, then they won't need to hire tax-funded lobbyists to go and represent them in their interests. It seems like they're electing one person and paying them, and then paying a lobbyist to go do the exact same job. The district really wants to, as well, they want to see constitutional carry. The Republicans have controlled the trifecta in legislation since 2006. Governor's office since 95, I think state senate since 96. And we can't pass constitutional carry to follow the suit of 15 other states. They want to see, our homesteads protected from HOA. They're tired of homes being lien put on them because they didn't cut their grass and they got a $250 fine. They want to see, tuition, because I have Texas State in my district. They want to see student tuition under control. Move it to the natural rate of inflation, 2-4%, and instead of this 5-10% of what they see, and maybe students can actually afford to go to school and not come out with abundance of debt. So, thank you.
Just a real quick follow-up. Why do we need constitutional carry?
The way it was outlined in our Constitution, as well as presidents have even articulated, like Reagan. It's an inalienable right. It was. I think, in the way I describe it, is our freedom was given an instruction manual. And as much as I know men hate reading instructions when we buy stuff in from IKEA, all we have to do is follow it. Is follow the instruction manual. And constitutional carry gives law-abiding citizens who are not prohibited from carrying a firearm, from being previously convicted of a crime that limits their ability to own firearms. It doesn't give law enforcement the inability to prosecute if somebody's committing a crime and they're carrying a firearm. If you commit a crime and you're carrying a firearm, you're going to face the consequences. Sometimes there's a compound in that judicial system. And constitutional carry gives law-abiding citizens the ability to freely carry without having to be taxed on it. And I think that's all it is these fees and licensing are just a taxation, a revenue stream for our state. We have 15 other states in our nation that have it. So why doesn't Texas? If we're supposed to be the flagship of conservative values, then let's start acting like it.
I wanted to follow up to something
Yes.
you were talking about, constituents in your district, or people in your district talking about the rising cost of not having enough infrastructure. You said the district needs somebody who can work with the legislature to fix that. What do you propose there? Elaborate on what you mean.
Well, a strong voice that works openly, and listen, I'm proud to be endorsed by two of our Republican commissioners sitting on the commissioners court in Hays County, which is where we have the greatest need for infrastructure. Mark Jones in Precinct 2 and Walt Smith in Precinct 4. Someone at the Capitol that has those strong connections with the commissioners court and can serve as a conduit and a voice between the Capitol and work to bring those funds. Mark Jones did some wonderful work for not only Hays County but Travis County in getting the 45 bypass put in place. Someone that understands those needs, has those relationships, has the same goals to provide that infrastructure, and is willing to work hand in hand with the county in making that happen, is what I'm hearing time and again people want. Someone that makes it a priority and is willing to follow up with that. And if I might touch briefly on the issue of constitutional carry, I think that's exactly right. My position on constitutional carry is that, one, I support it. Two, I think it's sad that we need any law to allow people to do what the United States Constitution says that they can do. People that have ill will, people that want to do wrong, will do it,
Freely.
regardless of where they are. But people exercising their constitutional right to keep and bear a firearm is something that we should proudly do as Texans.
I wanted to touch, since we still have a little bit of time on the question, on the infrastructure. That is a great concern, not only in Hays County, but in Travis County. You know, I have a MUTCD background. You know, I know what it takes to work with the engineers that build those infrastructures, the guidelines that they have to follow within the state, the nation, and as well as international MUTCD regulations. Built the relationships with TxDOT. I don't understand how Texas at one time was one of the top 5 leaders in the nation on infrastructure and roadways, freeways, and highways. Why aren't we the same? We're towards the bottom. And I think those skill sets are going to suit me well. I was in charge of an RC East area in Afghanistan. I had a lot of moving parts that I was in charge of within the intelligence world and operations world. It's the size of the state of Virginia. So I'm pretty certain I can handle the size of HD 45 in Hays and Blanco County. 290 is a big hot topic for us, and we need to address the safety there.
Mr. Wymore, you say your platform says you support securing the border.
Yes.
What does that mean? Elaborate on that, and do you support a border wall?
Yes, I do. I absolutely do. And what I mean when I say supporting the border is using the tools that we have in the state of Texas to protect the border. I believe in immigration. I believe in doing it the right way. America was built on immigration, and that's a history that we should value and that we should prize. But there's lawful ways to do it, and there's unlawful ways to do it. As in the state capitol, we need to not only have people that will stand for the right ideas, we need to have people that are willing to actually take the right actions. Governor Abbott recently took a position about refugee settlement, and I was very proud to see that. There's a continued narrative, and in my opinion, an attempt to redefine immigration that happens illegally and now redefine it as something else. I firmly believe that America is the greatest nation that ever existed. And I know that there are people from all over the world that want to come here, but we've got to do it the right way. Just because things might not be as good, just because bad things happen in other parts of the world, doesn't mean that we can accept anyone that wants to come here for whatever reason. And as Texans, we need to work to ensure that the border is protected, standing for those right ideas, building the wall, and doing what we can locally to give the resources to National Guard when they're called in to help.
Do you support the wall?
Yes, I do. I lived in Laredo, Texas for 6.5 years. Back then, it was Gonzales Bath was the big cartel name. I went to school with his son and 2 daughters. If they wanted to sit in your desk, you moved. So the wall isn't separating families. It's separating potential victims from predators. They're known predators. They're taking advantage of our communities in dense population areas. They understand the laws and regulations of catch and release when it comes to even simple drug trafficking. They understand that there's a level of narcotics that somebody who's underage can bring over, and that they'll catch them, take the narcotics off, use them as intelligence sources, and then kick them out. But these kids don't talk because they're more afraid of cartels than they are of our own federal government. My dad did the job for 24 years as a federal agent, as a criminal investigator, and with Homeland Security. When Victoria Massacre took place in the 90s, there was 123 people that were killed in Victoria, Texas. They were left there and locked and left in the heat in the back of a trailer. Same thing happened recently, just a few years ago in San Antonio. They were left in the trailer. And so when we're able to now address our security concerns and with structure, intelligence, sensors, more personnel, then we can now focus on legal immigration and reform the policies that definitely need to be reformed. And streamline the countries that have great relationships. I just attended up in Boston a swearing in of over 300 legal immigrants, and I talked to them. They're from all over the world. They had phenomenal stories. They all, put their hand on the heart, did the Pledge of Allegiance. They took the oath of citizenship, and they all articulated that some of them did this for 2 years, went through the process to 10 years, and their stories were great. And the reason why I was there is because a young woman was in my military unit, and we all went as a unit to watch her swear in. And so she was willing to serve her own country, for this country, for 2 years before it became her permanent country. And a phenomenal young woman. So I agree that we need to do something to secure it. We did it in Iraq and Afghanistan. If you want to control a threat from outside parties, when RCE's neighbors, Pakistan, the majority of all the terrorist trafficking, narcotics trafficking, human trafficking was coming through, we had to secure the border. We have over 300,000 a year in the state of Texas. University of Texas did an independent study. 75,000 to 79,000 are under age of 18. That's for sexual trafficking, and that's a horrible fact to face as a society. And if we ignore it, it's just going to continue to exist.
By and large, Congress has resisted giving the president the kind of funding he wants for the border wall. So he's taking money earmarked for military spending. Yeah. Is that all right with you?
When I took the oath of office, which it's the same oath that many of our government officials take. It's becoming just a ceremony. But when you take it in uniform, whether it be law enforcement or military, it says to protect enemy from foreign or domestic. Protect your country from foreign or domestic enemies. And so yes, I think that's part of the, we have NORTHCOM for a reason. NORTHCOM is to look at North America and all of the threats that may affect us here in the United States. And having non-secured borders is a threat to our community. I'm glad you brought that up, because Texas has one of the largest surplus in the nation. If Texas wanted to solve its own problems, Texas could. But Texas is not even giving people a tax break with that surplus budget. So, why aren't they doing security measures to increase what the federal government's not doing?
Same question for you. Is it okay to spend money for earmark for the military on a border wall?
Yes, I firmly believe it is. If there were a strong, legitimate challenge to it, I believe that it would have been initiated and it would have stopped. But bottom line, it's providing for the common defense, and that can have a very broad interpretation. There are people from around this world that will find any way they can to come into this country and do it harm. I'm not saying everyone that comes across the border has ill will or ill intent. There are many that don't. But there is a problem in using those funds to ensure that America is as safe as it can be, is providing for the common defense, and I support it.
You talked a little bit about property taxes earlier.
Yes.
Both of you call for reducing property taxes. But what action should the legislature take next session to achieve that? Specifically, how do you do that? How does the legislature do
Oh gosh, I mean, back to the answer that I gave earlier. I would be a proponent of putting an annual dollar cap on the amount that property taxes can increase. Anyone in this room, I said, goes and looks at that property tax bill and they know that it's going to increase no more than X number of dollars. There's peace, there's confidence, and there's certainty in that. It provides people with the knowledge that they need to plan so that they're not taxed out of homeownership. That's an extremely important thing. And again, what that does, if everyone sitting at this table knows my property taxes aren't going to increase more than $100, $200, whatever that number is in any given year, you exponentially decrease the likelihood of property tax protests.
How is that different from the 10% cap?
Well, what you have such wildly different variations in property values, and 10% of one number is it can be less, but I like the idea of a dollar cap.
Same for everybody. $1 million house, $200,000 house.
I'm not wed to any specific idea, but enough to give people certainty, so that they're not facing that concern of whether or not they're going to be able to meet their obligations. 10%, that's fine, but it depends on what type of property on the value of it, and I think everyone across the board deserves that dollar amount certainty. It also serves to de-incentivize those protests. The other thing that I would support, and it must result in a net decrease in taxes, is if we look at statutorily reducing rates, shifting to somewhat of a consumption model, where we look at non-essentials, not the milk, bread, eggs, cheese, but we look at those things like energy drinks, candy bars, not what a family would need to sustain itself. And we include a marginal increase in the sales tax for those types of things. And again, it must result in a net decrease in taxes for people. But those are ideas that I would see that would be good for the state of Texas. Things to shift the burden off of taxing homeownership and taxing people out of homeownership.
Bud and I live in a district that's very populated by the commuter resident, as well as the retired residents. And the 10%, I would agree with Bud is a little too drastic. I'm more lean towards the natural rate of inflation on quite a few things when it comes to increase. It's because if everybody else has to operate in the natural rate of inflation, I think the government should too at a minimum. I do like the consumption tax possibility, and many legislators I've been talking to the last 3 years on talking about some spending reform, decrease our spending. They said it would take 50 years to implement all of the things they would take for consumption tax and cut budgeting, et cetera, et cetera. And I said, well, why don't we start? And we can only accomplish things if we start those endeavors. So if you get 10 years out of me as a state legislator, or 8 years, because I believe in term limits, if you get 8 years out of me as a legislator, then that's somebody I can pass on the torch. And I think we need to start having good practices instead of having an educational vacuum. Why wouldn't I want to work with the next legislator and say, hey, these are the things that are kind of going forward, whether they're not party exclusive. These should be bipartisan objectives because they're for the betterment of Texas residents. The Democratic Party is not like the national DNC, and Texas Republican Party is not like the national GOP. And so we need to start tackling endeavors like that. And I think we increase government transparency, so that means there's more visibility that the taxpayer can see where every dollar is going. We stop taxpaying funding lobbying. We get a hold of our appraisal districts and chief appraisals, as well as decrease or end state spending on non-performance projects or committees or commissions. If they're not performing and meeting the expectations, I'm coming from the private sector, If it doesn't meet the expectations of my board or my shareholders, then you cut it. You stop throwing money at it. And we're throwing money at problem sets that are committees that shouldn't exist when that could be tackled on to another committee or commission or project.
Are you talking about CPS? Can you give us an example?
I had an example right over my head because I knew you would ask. So I was preparing for that follow-on question. I like right now we have a project which I think is great because it's a mix of public, private, and nonprofit sector. It's called See Me Now, and that's to address human trafficking. So I know there's that's being addressed within law enforcement as well. So are we double paying what we're paying in law enforcement and paying in this endeavor? Or we need to really scrutinize how we're going to marriage these three endeavors. The nonprofit sector, which there's phenomenal nonprofit sectors that are addressing human trafficking. I learned that in the veteran community. We don't become dependent of the federal government to address our concerns. My generation of veterans went and addressed our concerns with mental health and issues like that. We want to do it with non-traditional forms. So I think there's a lot of ability to look at government and how we're performing. I did it here at the City of Austin. I did a 90-day evaluation action plan and how are we conducting operations. I noticed just a simple thing in operations where if they would stay in the same 8 grid squares all day long and did all their engineer requests, did all their customer service requests, and did all their maintenance log in that 8 grid squares all day long, it saved them $179,000 in 6 months in fuel cost. I know that could be done at the state level. So that's why I emphasize if you're not willing to work 16, 20-hour days, you don't deserve the job. It's only 140 days a session. My deployments were longer than that.
You mentioned earlier that the state has a budget surplus. So should the state put some of that money into education more money?
So if you look at the last 10 years, how much money we obviously Texas I think 34th in the nation now. I would like Texas, having NASA here, to be in the top 5. But we keep throwing money at the issue, and that increases, and our curve of education output isn't increasing at the same rate. So I think it's using that money or budget effectively. They even took out the earmark where it was strictly to be done for teachers getting pay raises, and it became ISD employees. So that could be anybody. That's not specifically for a teacher. And the teachers that I've met with throughout the district had a lot of group sessions with. Their biggest concern is classroom sizes, standardized testing, and special education. Texas alone, I think we last year we paid $223 million in fines to the federal government because we weren't funding special education the way it should be. So that was a waste again. I think if we do away, I believe it's 2-to-1 administrators to actually educators. But why is that? That's ridiculous. The educators are the primary job in our ISDs. That should be the biggest position held. And I think if we start paying the teachers who are bilingual or trilingual, who hold multiple degrees, who can teach multiple subject matters, then we can draw talent. That's what I have to do in the nonprofit world and the private sector, is I have to draw talent that people are willing to either relocate from another state to this state or quit a job to come take a job. And the only way you do that is incentivize, and it has to be intrinsic or extrinsic. And if the work environment is hard because they're having to meet all the standardized testing and ignoring students that need a little bit of additional focus, people learn differently. They learn audially, they learn visually, they learn through doing it practically. And if you can't adjust to that student's need because our classrooms are 35 to 45 in body, that's crowd control. But if they're 27, 25, like teachers have asked me to help them with, then you can start addressing those concerns and saying this child, like myself, I was audio. Somebody would read whatever it would be, I could understand it and memorize it like that. And so I love audible books, but I had to learn that I had probably a little bit of dyslexia. So in college, I had to read it 2-3 times, then be able to apply it. And, Laredo, Texas at one time had the highest illiterate rate of high school graduates. Couldn't read and write, and they were graduating high school. That's a problem. And I don't think money is the solution to that.
When you're talking about what teachers tell you in your conversations with them, you mentioned classroom size and other problems that they cite. Did they not say they want more pay?
That really never came up, in which it gave me a lot of hope, because I still have a lot of fondness for a few teachers when I graduated from New Braunfels High School. I went there for 1.5 years when my dad relocated. But it's always a concern. People just don't want to look, self-centered, and I understand that. And you just say, listen, I know you guys deserve more money. The amount of hours you're putting, the amount of resources you're pulling out of your own pocket to pay for things that are needed for students. I think if we offset that, I think there'd be a lot of happy teachers. I think, like I said, it would attract talent. And if you attract talent from all over the nation, that was one thing I loved about University of Tampa. My last 3 core professors were all Harvard PhD graduates. And I told each one of them, I said, this was the first time I felt like I was in college, because they challenged me so much. So I think a rigorous education forum, you take best practices from private sector and nonprofit sectors of charter schools and whatnot, and you implement those lessons learned and you put them into our public sectors. I think you're gonna make a perfect storm of success, and it's the students. It's not the other way. It's not the state. It's the students that need to have that success and adapt to it. Not everybody needs to be a degree in college, but let's figure out if we're giving them the skill sets to be successful after high school.
So Wymore, is the state adequately funding education?
I think your question was, should we take some of those excess funds and apply them to education? And the answer is yes. I am a strong supporter of public education. I highlighted earlier that the district that my kids are going to school in is Hayes CISD School District. That's the same district where my mother was an elementary school teacher and principal, where my sister is currently a kindergarten teacher. What I tell people is, where you put your public dollars is a statement of your collective morals and values as a society. At the federal level, the most important thing we do is we provide for the common defense. At the state level, we provide, at least we do our best, to provide an adequate education. And the way that I've described it is our job in the state of Texas to provide that fair, adequate, and equal education for all children in the state of Texas. Part of what I'm proud of is the relationships that I've built in the years that I've been in district with not only teachers in the district, but also folks that are serving on the school boards. I'm proud to be endorsed by numerous present and former school board members for Hayes CISD, Dripping Springs, Wimberley, and Johnson City. And have individually met with multiple superintendents across the district. The biggest things that I hear about, and you hit directly on it, is one, pay. Again, I believe teachers deserve it, and I'm thankful for the work that the legislature did last time. It was wonderful. It's putting your money where your mouth is and living up to those collective morals and values of our society. But there's got to be more. The other thing is unfunded mandates. In talking with teachers across the district and school board members, there's a lot of work that's put on the back of our educators. They're engaging in the noblest of professions and doing a job that, quite frankly, I don't think I'm equipped to do. That's a tough job. You're in a classroom 6 hours a day with 20 plus children, and you're trying to keep them under control and teach them at the same time and impart knowledge and wisdom. That's tough. And we ought to be thankful for that. And when we look at the cost of it, I think the alternative is to say, what does our future look like if we don't make that investment? Why have we decided as a state that this is so important? It's because we want to see not only a better Texas, but a better nation for tomorrow. And by making that solid investment, we don't just pay lip service to what it is that we've said we're going to do as a state, but we actually follow through on it.
Is there the money to do that, though, with the kind of property tax caps that you're talking about?
Well, I mean, one, I think the question was related to the surplus in the budget.
Sure.
And the answer is yes, because what we're looking at the system that we're operating in, and here's the state's obligations, here's the surplus. Now, what have we decided to do with that surplus? And at present, we've said, let's let it be a surplus. And what I'm saying is, let's take that and let's invest it in living up to those collective social morals and values. Let's fund those unfunded mandates. Just because we seek to cut taxes doesn't mean that we eradicate any surplus. Doesn't mean that we don't have that surplus. But it says, let's take that money that we have. If the surplus is X or if the surplus is Y, let's take that and make that investment in our public education system.
But to address, I think, what your question is Texas is doing two things. They're doing the Robin Hood, which I don't agree with, and they're also doing the recapturing. And so when property taxes are raised and the county is now looking at, or the district is now looking at, well, we got this much money, we can utilize it. And the state sneaks in and says, oh, nope, this percentage is ours. That's wrong. That's once again the state looking at their budget. They increased it last session, which I'm completely appalled of. I think we needed to go to a conservative budget outline. I think we need to address some concerns of how we're spending this money, and use the intended revenue streams for the revenue streams for the intended purpose. We've always compromised it. We've compromised it with the lotto, that we all got that bill of goods sold to us when I was like 17, 16 years old. We compromised it with the gas tax at the pump. And why are we doing that? You know, if I did that as my budget in nonprofit, I would definitely get kicked out. If I did that as a private sector, my board members would be asking me, what am I doing? Do I even know how to manage a budget? And so that's what I'm asking is, what are we doing at the public sector?
We've talked you guys have talked a lot about financial type issues. Let me ask about some of the social value issues that end up getting a lot of the headlines in the legislature. So on abortion, has the state legislature gone too far, not far enough, in terms of restrictions on abortion?
I think when you can express a point of view, like I did with the border from my personal experience, watching the violence and everything, I can only tell you how I feel. And if it happens to be aligned with my party as well as my community, then great. I was born 3 months premature. I went down to 1 pound, 4 ounces. Every doctor told my dad I wouldn't make it. My dad obviously had a different opinion of that, and God had a different purpose for me. I think I've taken advantage of every opportunity presented to me in life. And I even got mad at my dad one day when he got a relative of mine an appointment for a federal testing, and he never did that for me. And my dad looked at me and he said, I just got out of your way, and you went and accomplished everything you wanted to. So I believe the state of Texas, right now, what people want and what I want is there's a minimum I think we need to address, whether it be protecting babies at 10 weeks of brain function and heartbeat or 8 weeks of heartbeat. But there's a big portion that believe that we need to do more and go as far as abolishing abortion in the state of Texas. I signed that pledge with Abolish Abortion in Texas. And it's because I'm looking at the sanctity of life. And if the traditional roles of government is protect life and liberty and get out of your way for pursuit of happiness, then I believe human life begins at conception.
I don't think the legislature has gone too far. I am unashamedly pro-life. I oppose abortion, and one day I hope Roe v. Wade is overturned as the law of the land. But that's not going to happen through an approach that that is overtly aggressive and without thought. It has to, this is a very important argument, and just like the argument with public education. I believe this is a defining issue, socially and morally, for this generation of people and how we handle it. The fact that the discussion of abortion has gone so far as to have the governor of Virginia, Ralph Northam, to claim that after a child is born, they could be aborted. It's appalling to me. It speaks to an erosion of the heart and the soul of this nation. I get that there are folks that disagree on what happens when a woman is pregnant during the first and second trimester. But the fact that we're having that conversation in this nation, it's saddening and it's concerning. And I hope to be part of a legislature that, in an intelligent way, in a thoughtful way, seeks to work to restore that social and moral high ground where we say we are all God's creation and we protect life and we stand for life at all points.
Something completely different.
Yes.
I'm curious what kind of legislator you think you would be. We have some who try to work with people of all stripes and come to some kind of consensus, even though it may not be what they were originally intending. And then we have some who are more of the maverick firebrand variety, going to stand on whatever my principles are, and question from the back mic or whatever. We've seen that happen. So, could you describe your style, and could you? Yeah, we'll start with you. And is there a legislator you could point to as somebody you would use as a model, or you think does a good job?
I mean, who I would be as a legislator, it's more than looking at other legislators. It's a matter of who you are to your core, and how you live your life as an individual. Like anyone else, I'm not without fault, but on a daily basis, how I try and conduct myself as a husband, as a father, as a practicing lawyer, as a gentleman who treats people with love, kindness, decency, and respect. Because we all deserve that. When I first started running, someone said, "How would you describe your candidacy?" And immediately what came to mind is George H.W. Bush's reference to a kindler and gentler nation. That's what I believe that we need. You turn on the TV now, and everyone fights, everyone argues. And return to an era of respect and kindness. It's not an era of backroom deals, but it's stepping into a position, feeling the weight of that position on your shoulders, wearing that burden, and walking forward with dignity and class, and saying, whatever it is that I do, I want to make the people that I'm representing proud. And I firmly believe that you do that by working with people of all stripes. Not only if you disagree, even if you vehemently disagree. You listen, you hear, you think, and then only once you've done those things do you make your decision. So I don't know if I necessarily gave you a representative, but that kindler and gentler nation is an overarching theme, and it stuck with me.
So I've put a lot of thought in that actually the last 3 years, and my biggest concern. So I would use two benchmarks that I think are pretty good legislators. Kyle Bienerman being one in the neighboring district over in Fredericksburg, and outgoing Jonathan Stickland, which I think are two great legislators in the Republican Party, one being a trailblazer, and one I think very evenly killed, invites a lot of people to the side of his argument. I think Ronald Reagan expressed that perfectly. If somebody who agrees with me 80% is not 80% my enemy, they're 80% my ally. Not 20% my enemy, 80% my ally. And so I believe you have to build bridges. My skill sets in human and collection in the military, if I can get a Taliban member or an ISIS member to come to what I call Team America, that was somebody with a moral compass that doesn't maybe align with the majority of the world. We can agree on that. This is somebody who's terrorizing, for political or personal gain. And if I can get them to see the error of their ways and come to the side of more of a cohesiveness of Western society, then I'm pretty certain I can get a Republican who's not morally broken to see that maybe they should sign this bill. I'm pretty certain I could do that as well with the Democrats.
I'm enjoying the Taliban legislation.
Yeah, I was like, if I could sit across the table from a Taliban member, I'm pretty certain I can sit across the table from a Republican or Democrat and convince them the importance of this bill. I'm all about productivity, and if you have ideas and principles, none of those mean anything unless you apply those ideas and you live up to those principles. And we've had the trifecta since 2006. I mentioned. What's going on with our party platform? It keeps growing and growing. Last year was 332 items. We passed 60 of them. Well, how many were in the top 50, top 25, top 10? So the party puts their top 5 on their website, RPT's website. None of those got passed. So I think if we go, well, listen, we're passing 1,000 bills, and you come to me as a legislator, I'm going to say, well, co-author top 50 legislative platform items. You co-author these with me. I'll look at that and I'll co-author that with you. And the other thing is term limits. I'll co-author that. Sign this pledge for term limits. Because if 8 years was good enough for George Washington, I think 8 years is good enough for a state legislator.
I'm curious if you all agree with the governor when he says that Austin is being derelict in how it addresses homelessness. If you do agree, how would you address homelessness?
I think I've mentioned before. I think it has to be a centrifuge between public, private, and nonprofit sector. I think the city of Austin sadly does a lot of talk on how they want to implement meaningful action, and they don't. I've seen it firsthand. I've seen it with nonprofit sector that we try to present solutions to the city of Austin, and they could care less. We're starting a project up in Georgetown called the Purple Heart Integration Project, where we're going to house 80 veterans with extreme disabilities for 6 months to 18 months. And we're going to do physical rehab, continued physical rehab, psychological rehab, drug dependency rehab, and vocab training, whether it be white collar or blue collar skill sets to get them back and being productive members of society. And some of that's going to include the homeless percentage. I mean, there's 40,000 homeless veterans, 45,000 homeless veterans in the nation, and about 5,000 of them are females, and of those females, a large percentage have their children. Like, we need to address this. And so I think you need to go back to what other states have done successfully and other municipals have done, is do away with the panhandling, because we have to address public safety right now. There's people getting stabbed in the streets, getting stabbed at coffee shops, and other than right now, I normally carry my CHL with me because it's becoming, it's almost the same mentality I had to have in Iraq and Afghanistan. Like, there's a possibility there's somebody out there wanting to do harm to me or others. And so you need to do away with panhandling. You need to put more of the homeless shelters and soup kitchens outside the city limits. And then you need to partner with private sectors who want to address this concern, as well as nonprofit sectors, and find meaningful solutions to this problem. And the city of Austin is just not doing it. And I wouldn't be surprised if the governor tries to do something and taking more authority away from city of Austin municipal government and become more of like DC, and start implementing more state policies and actions and resolutions, which I don't necessarily agree with. But if a municipal is not doing their job for public safety and the betterment of a population to address mental health and other issues, then something needs to be done now, and it needs to be done next session. No more next session. I'm tired of hearing that.
So they've determined that a non-threatening request for help to be constitutionally protected speech. So I'm just wanting to know, when you say panhandling, what do you mean?
Well, so you got to figure out why is there a continuous growing population of homelessness here, and then why is it existing in dense population within the city of Austin? And so if panhandling, like when I was doing stuff even in the fraternity, we had to go get a license to be able to go do fundraising on the street and hold a sign. That's not the case with somebody who's panhandling and asking for money. Unfortunately, there's a mental health concern, and then there's a drug dependency concern. So do we truly know that this person is utilizing the money which good human beings, like I believe everybody at this table, like I believe in, you take care of your homeless, give to the less fortunate, from the Christian values I was brought up with. But if that is creating a dense population where we're having a migration of homelessness here, you have to start doing things that can first take away the desire to come to the city of Austin. So if they can't freely panhandle on the street, then that'll spread them out, because we're like, oh, you just took away my source of income. But if you're willing to offset that with meaningful resolutions, instead of just saying, creating this problem set by having these campsites and then asking the state to address it, which is what Mayor Adler's done, that's a problem. And so that's why I'm like, well, let's figure out how to cut a resource off, because that's what we're taught in the military. You cut a resource off and then address the concern. And I didn't say ignore them, but let's address it. And saying, okay, well, we're going to provide you shelter, we're going to provide you food, we're going to provide you a shower, we can provide you the things that you need to be addressed as a human being. But we don't need you on the streets panhandling and using drugs, and then you get upset because somebody says no, and then you stab them at a coffee shop. That's a mental health issue then as well. That's why I'm big on it. Let's address that.
To answer your question, yes. I think the governor's got it exactly right. Well-intentioned acts are not always the right acts. And I won't question Mayor Adler's heart, but I think from a policy standpoint, he's dead wrong. What we're seeing in the city of Austin mimics what we've seen in San Francisco on a smaller scale, where you see a rash of crime, violence, and all of these things, when they come together, I think are destructive of businesses, of property values, and the state needs to step in and do something. As a Republican, I can tell you that I strongly support local control, but there's a caveat to that. When local control runs amok, I think it's okay for Republicans to step in and say, you're not doing your job. And they're not. We shouldn't have those types of attacks downtown. We shouldn't have people worried about heading downtown and going shopping or going to work or going to have dinner with their family. And I understand your point when you talk about speech. Where do we draw the line on that? I think is an extremely important question. Do we wait until we have a certain number of attacks? Do we wait until we have a murder? Do we wait until we have something like the Kate Steinle situation, where someone's out and a firearm is discharged? And I know that these are all hypotheticals, but the point is, just because every individual isn't engaging in an overtly dangerous act doesn't mean the collective presence of what we're seeing in the city of Austin isn't, one, dangerous, 2 destructive of businesses and 3 destructive of property values. And the city of Austin has overstepped. They're picking winners and losers. They're thumbing their nose at the people that have worked hard, own those properties, and own those businesses. And I think the state needs to step in and do whatever it can to stop it.
What should that action look like from the state?
Oh, I think there's potential reforms to the local government code, which is where municipalities derive their authority, where those types of decisions that are made that would allow a type of those homeless camps to exist, address that issue. Worst case scenario, if you need to send in state law enforcement to address that issue, I would be okay with it. But it's a huge problem. I think Governor Abbott's sentiments are exactly correct, and I support whatever we need to do as the state of Texas to clean that up.